good evening and welcome. At Burlington City Arts, we're always so proud to bring all of you together in these community conversations, an opportunity to meet with artists, to really understand their intentions, their process, how they think, how the work evolves. And we're so lucky when we actually get the opportunity to have an artist in the work here at BCA in this human impact exhibition to understand in a much deeper way what the intent of Diane Burko is. And Diane, I know you know Burlington quite well and have lots of family in the area, and welcome to your family and a celebration of you this evening. I think most importantly, we are part of this exhibition is to try to bring different members of the community together to have different types of conversation about the human impact on climate change. And tonight is a part of that series and a part of the building that understanding. We're very proud in the city of Burlington to have a climate action plan and to have many, many engaged people in determining what the future of this city and what this region is going to be. And we know that artists have a significant role in shaping what that outcome is possible. It's not Earth Day today, but in honor of Earth Day. Does everybody know Earth Day was yesterday? Okay, sorry. Well, but in honor of Earth Day, we are here with artist activist Diane Burko, who has traveled the globe searching for evidence of humankind's impact on the natural environment and on our world. Exploring the intersection of art and environment, Burko discusses her creative practice tonight and her critical engagement with the scientists and the people and the environs that inform her Amazon series. This is featured in our exhibition downstairs. We're going to keep the galleries open in case you haven't had a chance to go through the show. Your work is elegant. Your work is it invites so much participation that when people are with it, you open so many doors to bring people inside to the experience. And it is extremely important to expose those relationships that you have spent so much of your life trying to understand. Diane has received her BA from Skidmore College, a few other Skidmore, whoa, Sarah Katz. Her MA from the University of Pennsylvania, MFA, ooh, big, thank you, correction, and exhibited her work extensively throughout the world. She's been at the Tang Museum, at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. She's part of the Phillips Collection, the National Academy of Sciences, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. She's received many awards for her work and probably not enough to contribute to all that you've done, but we are so proud tonight to welcome you. And I do have to just a few things before I start. I forgot I do this all the time. I have to thank everyone who made this exhibition possible. So first, I'll start with the Mellon Foundation, the Humanities Lab initiative that is migration through the Axiom Center for the Humanities at Middlebury College, the UVM Office of Research and Economic Development, the Gund Institute for Environment, the UVM School of the Arts, the Burlington Electric Department, the Maslow Family Foundation. Let's give them a round of applause. It takes more than a village, right? Like, look at that list. It's pretty incredible that people step up to support the arts. And here in Burlington, we're extremely lucky. We also have hospitality sponsors, the Lake Champlain Chocolate Company, and Burlington City Arts is also supported by the Vermont Arts Council and also the National Endowment on the Arts. So thank you very much again for coming. And Diane, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My voice is a little crazy, but you can hear me with the mic, right? I usually, is it on? Down. You can't hear. Okay. All right. How is it now? Okay. So, as I just said, today is Earth Day. Thank you for the introduction. And it is nice to see some faces who I know. And I've been to Burlington twice for my cousin's children's weddings, which were separated by a number of years. And I have a number of friends and a lot of cousins in the audience, which is really cool because they've never seen me do this. Anyway, I'm going to keep going like that because I don't have a clicker. Anyway, I'm going to talk about my evolution, but if I really did it, for all the decades I've been doing this, you'd be here until tomorrow. So this is very quick. I'm skipping the actual work. If you're interested in what I did in the first 20 or 30 years, go on my website. But what I want to talk to you about is how I went from a landscape artist to an environmental artist investigating all sorts of things, starting with glacial melt. But I am also a climate activist, as you said, because I'm a feminist. And every feminist is an environmentalist, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm very much a political animal. So it's really very gratifying that in the last 20 years, I've been able to combine my political activity, like anti-war and feminism and all those instincts, with the landscape and the environment. So it's really worked well for me. But I think it's important to realize that environmental activism is not a new contemporary thing. And I always love to show the Cole painting because way back in 1836, he was already worried about clear cutting. And then if you think going further into contemporary times, you got Bertinsky, who, if you don't know, you should look him up. He's fantastic, who's done just enormous amounts of work, basically film and photography. He too was interested in clear cutting, but in a different country. There's also Olafur Eliasson, very, very important artist and someone I had the privilege of meeting many years ago in Philadelphia. So I'm just showing you a series of different activities, different events throughout the world where climate change has been an important key. And artists, in their own ways, all very different, are responding to it and making art about it to alert the public, to make them understand. So, as I said, I'm going to talk about how I moved. Oh, I go back. So I was just using my hand that time. Okay. I'm not used to doing this. I was talking about my focus last century into this century. And I'm so old, I'm sort of straddling both centuries, which is really fun. So I can see back and forth. So that's I guess that was from in the 70s when I was doing lots of work in the Grand Canyon, flew with Jim Terrell, had a lot of adventures. And then you go into this century, and this painting is taken from a trip in the Antarctic in 2013. And how did that happen? People always ask, well, how does that happen? And there was an aha moment. And this painting has a lot to do with it. This is a very early painting from the 70s when I was doing a whole series of very narrow palette works about mountains, about vast spaces. That's what I love because I'm from Brooklyn. And you don't get to see many spaces like that in Brooklyn. And I always wanted to go out and really geologic phenomenons. Please come in. There are seats. Geological phenomenon have always been what I've just been, enjoying, and also aerial, looking down because it's more abstract. So how did it happen? In 2006, you might have noted that painting was from 76, but in 1976, yeah, I made the painting. And then in 2006, it was shown in an exhibition that was traveling. Actually, the curator was from Vermont, wasn't she, Amy? Yeah, I think she went here. I don't know if she ever taught here, but anyway, she was a curator at Tufts, and she was traveling the show. And I had just come back from a major volcano project, 4 years, but she knew about my Iceland travels, and she also remembered this painting. So at her show, she didn't have it. But in the next show at the Michener Museum, there was enough room. She called me up and she said, "Hey, what about one of those old paintings you did? It would really be cool," because it was like a fire and ice kind of an exhibition. So I said, "Okay." And it was in the show. Now, that painting was huge. And as I was walking around, like I'm walking around now and I'm talking to everybody about the show, I'm also thinking about a lot of other things because I'm a woman and we always think about many things at the same time, right? So I'm looking at the snow and I'm thinking if it's still there. And the reason is because of 2006, when Al Gore had just come out with his movie, and Elizabeth Colbert, who I used to read in the New Yorker, still do, came out with her first book, Field Notes from a Catastrophe. Climate change was kind of in the air by then. It was a public knowledge kind of a thing. And after I did that show, which is true, I think, for artists who work on projects, where you move from one thing to another, and you're not what they call a signature artist, like a Larry Pooms or Pollock. We always know the artist. I was moving on. And my thinking about climate change said to me, I got to figure out a way to make paintings that address climate change rather than just beautiful panoramic paintings that my gallery was selling, even though I loved looking at landscape. And the first place I went was to a book called Men and the Matterhorn. It was printed in 1970. Some of the lectures I showed the cover. Anyway, so what I did is I looked at these black and white photographs and I made a series of paintings about the Matterhorn. Everyone knows the Matterhorn, right? It's in Disneyland. So a friend of mine from New York, who always was very critical, was coming down, looked at the paintings, and I'm telling you, I'm so excited. I'm working on climate change. And she goes, "You're just making beautiful paintings. That's not about climate change. You got to go deeper." And she was right. And so I started going deeper. By the way, this is a more recent photograph of the Matterhorn. So you get where I'm going. There's trouble. Okay. And my first strategy is or was repeat photography, which glaciologists have been using forever, ever since they could. You know about glaciology. We'll talk later. Okay. So, and Grinnell, Mount Gould, which is has anyone been there? Montana. It's Glacier National Park. 250 glaciers when it was first named Glacier National Park, maybe 20 now. But anyway, I started researching using their images because they would go to the same places all the time and shoot from the same exact spot year after year. Aside from measuring, they did visual stuff as well. And I did a lot of work, and the first major show was in 2010, and it was called Politics of Snow. And what I used for the cover were source material, the actual material that I was using. So the first one I used was 1938, and it went all the way up to 2006. And the whole show was about that. I'll change hands. Recessional lines was the next strategy that I use. It's another one that glaciologists use. And I made a series of paintings about that. That's in a nice museum. I forget the name, MIA, Minneapolis Institute of Art. But then I discovered, and I love this whole field of looking down at things, and these are all Landsat images, and I'm always referencing those. So did a series of Landsat, which is another way to go. But all of that stuff up until 2011 was other people's images. And when I used to go out at the previous work, they were my images I was shooting. And I realized that's what was missing. I had to get out there and bear witness. And so I began doing that. That's just a photo. I also do photography. That's like a 40 by 60 series of photographs I did about the flight. That led to many adventures, starting with glacial melt. And, they occurred from 2013 to 2017. My husband, Richard, who's here, is a landscape architect, an artist, and we would do these adventures together. And he always calls himself Tenzing Norday. See, in Vermont, they know what that means. And in 2013, we really had an amazing opportunity where we, in a way, went to both poles the same year. One, because we were on a residency. He had a residency, I had a residency in the Arctic. And the other was because we had friends, Carol Celine, who you might know from Philadelphia, had relatives who work for one of these big companies. And when they fill up and they have spaces left over, they offer them to friends and family for 70% off. Therefore, we went. But I'm just going to feature a little bit the Arctic Circle residency because it was more about artists and scientists being together and exploring Svalbard. Does anyone know where that is? See, you're in Vermont, but there's only one guy in the audience who knows. 400, have you been there? Yeah, okay, we'll talk later. 400 miles north of Norway, way in the Arctic Circle. And it was quite an adventure. We were on a little boat. If you might have noticed, if I go back, you can go back. That was the fancy ship with 120 people. That was the barkentine with 26 people. It was a 3-masted barkentine. So it's much smaller, and that's just a map showing you where we went. I was very lucky, through a long story that I won't go into, to connect with a scientist. And we were able, before we met the group and did the residency, to go to, does it say? No, it's not saying it. I always forget the name of it. Well, I'll remember it in a minute. Do you remember the Nyalazand? We went to Nyalazand, which was this international research station in the Arctic. And I flew with him and some other guys to check their instruments. And they gave me crampons, which I had never worn before. And they jump out of the helicopter and they go, "Come on, Diane." I go, I've never, it was ice. It was a lot of ice. So, but I jumped and went around with them. And this is what we flew into. So you can imagine why I was a little worried. These are all crevasses. And we basically might have landed there. So we had a guy in the back. It had an engineer and everything. And you know how he told him how to land? A little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the left. You can go down. It was very crazy, but it was amazing. And it was, amazing. What else can I say? So there I was standing on my first glacier on top of the world. And I did it a lot after that. That adventure led to Richard and I deciding that we would go by ourselves to Greenland. You might have heard something about Greenland in the news lately. And we're flying from Iceland over to Ilulissat. Ilulissat is the fastest moving glacier in the Northern Hemisphere. And a little not so known fact, one of the icebergs from that is the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. So that was pretty cool. There I am looking down at this moving rush of ice that it keeps, depositing. And here's a painting that was about that. The people who live in Greenland call it Jakobshavn, but other people call it Ilulissat. And references, I'm always using references. I'm always researching. This was a map that I had at the time. I used that map to do that series of paintings, and this is one of the paintings that I just showed you. From there, we actually went again to Antarctica, another lucky break, and we were lecturers and educators with 25 other educators on Students for Ice. I give you this information in case you want to go. It's a wonderful experience, nonprofit, for college students and I think high school seniors to go either north or south and explore terrains. Then in 2017, we went to New Zealand. I did a little bit of lecturing there because they have glaciers. So we went to North Island, South Islands, where the glaciers were. And, you know, once you're down under like that, you have to go also to, wasn't there another one? Oh, no, maybe not. It comes later. But we did also go to Australia, and that's the next topic that will come in a minute, coral reefs. Okay. But doing all these experiences, what do you do with them? I go back into my studio and I translate. I keep learning. Petermann Glacier was really a cool thing to learn about. And a lot of this comes from NASA. You know, it's online. Anyone can see this information. And I'm always eating it up and looking at images. And from those images, I made these two paintings from another show that was in 2017 in Arkansas, of all places. Okay. And there was a really nice catalog, which is why I went to Arkansas to do the show. Okay. Oceans. So going back from New Zealand to Australia, 2017, 18, we start exploring another topic. And where's Tara? Right. Your brother, I think, was at your house. I'm with her brother and his girlfriend. I don't know if they were married then. And we're talking. And I know these people, but they're major international performers. So I'm always at their concerts. We never really talk. We had a chance to talk. So Christine asked me, what do you do exactly? And I start telling her. And she says, oh, that means you're like an environmental artist. And I said, yeah, I guess so. Well, we're doing this grant and we're going to go to all the national parks in America and dive and study coral reefs. You should come with us. I said, that's a great idea. I'm really interested in that, but I don't swim. But I learned enough to just snorkel. And so we went. And before we went, they were on Big Island. Richard and I went to Honolulu because we had been to Big Island. They were shooting there and doing their diving. And we went to the Hawaiian Institute of Marine Biology and learned from the scientists, which I, you know, did in other places as well. And then we went on our adventure. Oa and Molokai we did after American Samoa. Now, next question. Does anyone know where American Samoa is? It's far away. I mean, they only have one flight out of Honolulu a week. And we were there for about 10 days or so. But it was fantastic. So coming back, I do the same thing. I make paintings. So this was one of the paintings that came from that experience. But actually, that little piece of coral came from a lab at Temple University with another scientist that I met and visited with. They had like these extra. How do we collect information? Well, see, there's proof that I did actually do it, Richard and me. And we're collecting below, you know, we had a GoPro, but Richard also had a drone, one of many we've had over the years. And there we are again, and he's up there. Well, this is still down below, but then there, he's up there, I'm down there, and we photographed what was from below, you know, from above as well. There were videos that were made from some of that footage. And again, translating into the studio. So there's a studio shot of the work in process as I'm getting ready for a show that was going to be at the National Academy of Sciences. And there's another show, and I was using and this is an interesting thing. I hope there's some artists in the audience. So I was an oil painter. I mean, I'm still an oil painter. But when I got involved in this new topic, the question for me is I had no idea how I was going to visualize it. I am not a one of those, you know what I mean? I'm different from that. So I have to figure out a way and a material, and everything works together if you're going to make it work. And I said, you know, I should probably go into acrylic. Acrylic, I can pour. Acrylic is wet like the water, and that's the way to go. And one of the first things I did is I worked with a former studio assistant of mine, who's now a very close friend living in the UK. She did lenticulars. She went to University of the Arts. And that was her thing, photography of the lenticulars. So we were on a climate march, and I said to Anna, you know, I'm into this new thing, and it just occurred to me we should do something together because lenticulars move. A lenticular is like what you have in a lot of you don't know what a Crack-A-Jack box is, do you? But some of you do. But in those little boxes, they used to have these little toys, and it would be a kangaroo or it would be a rabbit, and you would just turn it. And that's what the concept of lenticular is. So we started working together, and it was in this show that our mutual friend helped curate. And this is an example of lenticulars, a series that we did. And it really helped me in terms of the paintings because the way you do them, they're animations. So she would be at the tripod, I was down below on the floor, and moving paint around, and you would have an animation. We had like 80, 70 shots, go back up to the computer and just pick a series of 15 and then 15 back. And that would create this lenticular that she she was the one who could get it processed, not me. Okay, so, and there's an install of part of the show. And out of that, I made a video because as she was doing this, I'm looking at it and I said to her, my God, this is fantastic. I got to shoot it. I started shooting it on my phone. Then I said, I got my, Canon 5 on the tripod. So then I just made it and made this video you can all see on my website somewhere. Okay. Oh yeah. From there, we go to 2019 and I did a series of paintings that are each 88 by 50, but they're long. It's a 56-foot long series. If you have a spot for it, let me know. One of them has been sold to JP Morgan, but we can borrow it back if we have to show it. So anyway, this was that world map series. And this was all happening 2019, 2020. There was a major heat wave, one of the major heat waves we've had. You realize that they've gotten hotter and hotter. And this happened in 2020. And I had friends in Europe, so I knew all about it. And I was moved to respond to it because not only was there the heat wave, but there also was Australia where we had been. And this iconic image, I was in all the papers. And so that was in my head, resource material. And then I started making this painting called Summer Heat. And it's a combination of many paintings. It's like 42, 42, 60, 84, 60, 84. It all went together. And what's great about this painting is way after that, in 2023, it was used in a scientific study to measure if people actually have a different response to looking at imagery as opposed to data, although there is data in here, and they do. So I got proof, okay? And I mean, even hyperallergic picked up. It was published in Nature, but a lot of places picked it up. But being it's an art audience, I thought you'd appreciate hyperallergic. So we're all in this together, remember? And you respond. Artists respond to the times they live in. So this was one of the paintings about visualizing the pandemic. And then I did another one. I'm glad this is here. This is the painting that's in the collection of the National Academy of Sciences. So there you go. And then there was this major show. And I don't know if there are any more of the catalogs available on Amazon. I tried to find one and I couldn't, but I have some at home, don't worry. So this was a show basically about climate change. And it's been the biggest show I've ever had. There are over 100 pieces in it. And we have these two from my series, but then COVID happened. So I made another one. And that was about COVID and how, if you look at the air, when you go on an airplane, all the lines. And I remember Richard came into the studio when I was making it. And he said, oh, that looks just like the airline map. And I said, duh. Yes, because it's the same thing, right? Climate change, COVID. We're all in this together. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. So therefore, it was very fitting. And then on the wall, they had 8 of these major lenticulars. They were 30 by 30. And there's one install, and you can see part of that series and that painting and some from the coral reefs. In that show, there was also this painting, which is 8 feet by 15 feet. And I'm happy to say it was at the Royal Academy in 2022. And on that wall, we had a series of 20 by 20 paintings in a grid fashion. And they were all ready, beforehand. And we were shipping the show in August. But in June and July, I started getting interested in the Amazon. And so we took out that middle row and we put in that row, which were the first paintings I did about the Amazon rainforest. How did that happen? Well, everything for me is very serendipitous. So I had that painting in the studio and I thought the wall was longer. So I made a series of 60 by 60s that kind of matched the structure of the big painting. One was about South America and the Amazon. One was about the Arctic and the Antarctic. And the other one was about all the fires in the West. That was basically my aha moment. Do you see how big that gray area is? That's the Amazon rainforest in South America. It literally touches 9 other countries. And that's how it looks in comparison to us. It's effing big, right? And it's in trouble. So I started making paintings about the Amazon. This was a series. It started with that. Well, once I had that painting, I just connected it. It's about the fires in the Amazon. And remote research is always part of my practice because I'm a research artist, like lots of artists today. So that's just a shot. And this is an example of some material that I used in a major painting that was in a show at Towson University. And there's an install shot. This painting is called Roads to Ruin, and it's about the roads that are being plowed through the Amazon so that they could have land to clear, to grow soybeans, to have more cattle graze, and to also mine for gold. So all of that is in this. And the Munduruku word across there is the name of a tribe that was fighting that kind of invasion. And it was led by women. FYI, just a little fact. So this is another install shot. But what's nice about this one, it's another area that I was looking into. This is now sacred land, the Yanomami, which is the largest indigenous tribe in South America, was there. And I've met with people from there. And then I was very lucky to get to the opening of this big show that was at the shed. And I met Davi Yapanawa, but I don't have a picture of him here. And there's, one of the paintings showing you where this piece is up there. I always love to do maps because they're aerial and they're beautiful and they're abstract. It's right on the edge of Venezuela, which has been in the news of late as well. You learn about all these countries because of our great president. Okay. So I haven't been there yet, right? Everything I had done was remote research. I was very fortunate to be selected for an international residency. And it was in the Amazon rainforest right outside of Manaus. This was a very cool residency. There were people in our group. Our cohort was Austria, London, Buenos Aires, Chile, Japan, and 2 from America. So we were 7, and we were paired with 6 people that were indigenous connected from northern Brazil. They spoke Portuguese, we spoke English, we had translators, and lots of intense classes, explorers, and we lived in, see that square? This is Manaus, which is a very, the city grew. It was a major city during the rubber trade. But that there is the forest reserve, which is reserved for really scientists, and also people like us. So we were there. And there's our barracks, no hot water. 3 people to a little space, but it was really cool. So that's where we were, in the middle of that rainforest. We did many, many explorers. This was one of the most significant ones, days for me. It started at 3 a.m. We got into the van because we wanted to see the sunrise. So it was sort of pegged from sunrise to sunset. And we are on top of a canopy. You climb up a tower, like it was about 25 floors or so. Not so easy for someone like me, but I did it. And then we had breakfast and we had lectures up there. And then, and of course, I did a lot of photography and made paintings and more. Yeah, well, actually, the painting downstairs has a photograph from this trip in it. And we went to lunch to a great swimming hole with a waterfall. We had this great lunch. And then we traveled to Balbina. We didn't know what Balbina was, but you could tell by what the natives called it, Cemiterio de Árvores. Eu não falo Portuguese, so I probably didn't say it right. I can't speak the language, but cemetery of trees. But we didn't see that when we first arrived. We saw pink dolphins swimming in water. You know, we went like on a wharf. We got out of the van and had a talk, and islands of green. So it was quite idyllic. But then we got in the boats and we went out to the cemetery of trees. And we stopped on a spit of land and they spoke to us. And they told us the story of Balbina. The young woman was extremely moving. The older man isn't in that picture, but the guy was about 65 and he had experienced the environmental disaster, the biggest environmental disaster at the time that happened in Brazil, which was all about corruption. And I call it a lot about hubris, thinking that you could do anything, you can control nature. We're going to build a dam so Manaus is going to have more power. But of course, in the Amazon, there's a dry season and a wet season. So there ain't no water, too much water for power in the dry season. So in the end, there's maybe 15% more increase. But what happened one year, I think it was done in 88, 89, and I think in 90 or so, there was a really major, major drought. So that all the water left and all you had was the debris of dead fish and dead animals and methane coming into the air. And then there was a lightning fire, and then the whole forest that was underwater got on fire, and it was a major, major disaster. Here she is actually talking. She's only talking in Portuguese, but it moved me to tears. You could actually hear the emotion in her voice. So that stayed with me. And here we are just about leaving and going back to get our van. But before we did, we actually passed the dam. And that's a picture from, my little motorboat. So translating the experience. When we got back, I still remember September 8th, I went to the Armory show, and then we're told that they want us, this, Lab Verde, which was the residency program, they wanted us to come up with some images by November 10th for a catalog. That's a very tall order. They didn't want the pieces, they just wanted the images. So I didn't know, again, what I was going to do, but Balbina was in my head. So I did a series. These are like studies about Balbina, and I did a series about Balbina. And that's the whole series, which is 296 inches long. Let's go back, because this is a fun story. I still have some time. This panel is 20 by 60. They're each one 20 by 20. And what we did is we put real photographs that I had taken. And I said to my studio assistant, you know what? I want to just pour paint over it, because to me that was representing what happened. And we did. And do you guys know about Instagram, right? And I'm on Instagram all the time. That Instagram post got like 25,000 hits. And I remember telling that to a friend. He goes, oh yeah, everyone likes pouring paint. And he was right. I just couldn't believe it. But anyway, so that was that series. And that's just one of the paintings up close, the 60 by 60. And These are more paintings from this series. I don't think any of these are in the show because they're earlier. So changing ideas a little bit, we go to another part of my life, which is where some of you have been, our place in Bucks County. We live in Philadelphia, and we have 3 acres about an hour and 10 minutes outside because of Richard's interest in landscape architecture. And he's also an artist. So this is an example of his art, I would say. And it's a dead hedge so that he could keep the deer out. And he was just building it, and I was there looking at it. And I said, I love the portals. Those are so fantastic. Where'd you get them? And he said, well, those are hollows that, we put in there. And I said, could you cut me some hollows? I could use them. So I did. We cut them together, and then I scorched them, and I started using them in my work. And these are early, but I think I have a picture of what I did with them at the end of this talk. And there's your painting up there. And that's a later one. And I put it up because it's prestigious, because it was another painting that was in another show at the Royal Academy just last year. Now, it's a little painting, but for me, the Royal Academy show, I didn't even know how important it was, but it's been going on since 1876. And it's their summer show. People compete or they're invited. I was an invited artist. Do you know who I'm on the wall with Anatsui and Frank Bowling, 2 heroes of mine, especially Frank Bowling, whose studio we actually visited because he lived next door to another friend of ours. So anyway, this was, the install at that place. Another residency just happened this summer. A lot of serendipity. I was approached because she knew someone who was on my other residency, and she told her you should talk to her, blah, blah, blah. So Richard and I did this residency in the Atlantic rainforest.
We feed
there's a little,
each other's
this is
energy.
a trailer.
There's always
The reason they did it and invited us, this was a relay chateau, exact opposite of no hot water. But we only had it for 5 days. But it was intense. We had our own tour guide. We did what we wanted. We flew over the Iguazu, which is where, and they did a whole video that they used for promotion because they're talking about how this is a, hotel that believes in the environment. And we as artists benefited from it. And there we are in another reserve where we spent a full day. And in that reserve, I didn't have to make art there. I could just have the experience, but we had been in London earlier that summer, saw a great show by Pannoni at Serpentine, and he was doing these rubbings. But he had walls full of them. Pannoni is a very famous Italian artist. So I said, maybe I could do that. So this was small enough. I just rolled off cloth and put it in a tube, and I did that. And Richard actually did a piece that was right there. And what do you call it? Like an intervention. So that's what we did. So when I came home, this is what happened out of it. The middle are the actual rubbings. Well, they're not the rubbings. They're photographs that were higher intensity and made them into prints. I made some paintings. These are all trees, obviously, from the Atlantic rainforest. And then these are composites of some of my stuff. Where is this Atlantic rainforest? It's Iguazu Falls. I bet my same geography guy is going to know where Iguazu is. No, it's right at the tip of Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. And it's this major, it's like, what's that other famous falls? Victoria Falls, very high. And we wanted to fly over it, and we did. This was a luxury residency. So we flew over it, and then we also walked on the Brazilian side. Another day we walked on the Argentinian side. And of course I made some, how could you not make a great photograph with something like that, right? And when I got back, I, again, had no idea. I did the tree thing, but what was I going to do in the studio? And I just wanted to do a painting about the falls, but this goes back to earlier painting style, and I'm not really interested in doing that. So I framed it, but what I was really thinking about was Balbina. I realized what was the connection. Well, in Paraguay, there was this hydroelectric plant, and I thought it came from that waterfall. And that got me started thinking about hydroelectric plants and mega dams. And so Three Gorges Dam, and then it related back to Balbina. So those are two paintings. I think they're 50 by 50. Research starts again, and I learn about this Vajont Dam about an hour north of Venice that was built in 1960. And there was a major disaster where they built it in a gorge, and the townspeople said, oh, they're building it in a moving mountain. I don't know if that's a good idea, but they didn't listen. Hubris, they know what they're doing. And so they did. And then there was a major disaster where the mountain behind the wall collapsed, and all the water came rushing down. The mountain came rushing down into the villages. 2,000 people were killed in 10 minutes. So I did some paintings about that. And I'm still now very involved in that. So it's just beginning. You're seeing the beginning of a project. But there's another project I just wanted to share with you. How am I doing? All right, doesn't matter. I'm going as fast as I can. Because I'm from New York, I talk fast. Rowan University asked me to be part of Rowan, and also that they asked me to be part of this study that they were doing, and they paid me, which was great. And it's an NSF grant. Why did they want me? Because I'm an artist. I can communicate all the arcane stuff that they're doing about radium isotopes in the Northern Arctic. And so I started this project. I show it now because it's the next show that's happening in September. And these are some of the pieces that will be in that show. This is a fun part of it. I wanted the glass, that's like safety glass, and I wanted it for my hollows. I wanted to fill a hollow with glass that looked like water or ice or whatever, just to have a tactile materiality aspect, because I love that. And then when I saw the glass after, I realized it looked just like ice. So I realized that I could make a series of these. I did like silk screens of the maps that they were using up there with the Trans-Polar Drift and Lapov Sea, right along Russia's northern coast and the Arctic. And then I adhered them, this is really funny, to photographs I had from my coral reef project. But no one knows that, but I'm telling you. Okay, and these are the last things. These are some of the hollows that will be in the show at Rowan, because it's not just about that. It's about extraction, where the curator is combining the ICE NSF study, which is about extracting information for good, and about extraction, which is always bad. So it's extraction of gold, and that's the ice or water, and then coal. That's real anthracite coal. Happen to have a friend who's carving in coal. So that's that, and to be continued. I hope there are questions. I should have put a shill in the audience. Okay, yes.
Positive, optimistic outlook when you're doing works that engage with climate change, especially being able to understand and see everything happening on such a massive scale.
It's not easy, but what choice do we have? I mean, dread is not an answer. We have to have hope. We've gone through, I mean, there's no way that 350.org, started by Bill McKibben. He sends his love, by the way. I wrote to him, he said, I'm in California, but I'll tell people to come. But anyway, he started that at 350, not wanting more than those particles. I think we're at 425 or more now. Whatever's in the air is going to stay in the air. So clearly adaptability is what we need now. But we have to keep trying, and we have to keep communicating and sharing the story so that more people vote against the kind of stuff that's been happening, and we bring back the EPA, we bring back all these things, which I think we have the hope of doing because of the asshole who's now running everything. So there's hope, and I'm a positive person. Yeah.
You mentioned JP Morgan. So, and I'm a climate activist as well.
Yeah,
And JP Morgan funds major fossil fuel
you're
extraction.
absolutely right.
And many of these museums, I mean, there have been lots
Absolutely
of protests that
right.
happen at these museums
Yes.
because of the the funding that's behind them. And so I just wonder how you reconcile.
Yeah,
that.
it's not easy, but what choice do you have? If they're supporting my work, which allows me to make more things and come to you and communicate for NSF or a lot of, the outreach I do, you have to acknowledge what they're doing. But, there was a great show at the New Museum a while ago. It was all about that, I think, all about how these corporations, they're greenwashing. We know that. We talk about that as artists, but we live in a capitalist society. We're not going to become total socialists, but maybe we could become humanistic capitalists. We have to try to move in that direction. Another, as a climate activist, I'm usually challenged. You're going all over the world. And what about your fossil footprint? Which is a valid question. I have a valid answer. I haven't eaten meat in 45 years. Okay. And I had someone, my hairdresser, I was talking to her about that. And she said, well, the cows are going to fart if you eat meat or not. But the atmosphere is not just taking in the farts, in the methane, it's taking in all the water, all the processing, and everything that's being done. So, I try to balance it. Yeah, it's not easy.
In the same kind of doomsday theme, my curiosity is more about what you feel your role is in bringing some of that resilience and some of the climate solutions that we've been developing over the years into the forefront of bringing that hope.
Yes, I do that in lectures, depending upon, who my audiences are. This lecture was really much more about my research and the climate than sometimes I'm talking to artists. It's more about process and development. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of hope. Elizabeth Colbert has written a recent book about all that. I encourage you to read everything she writes. And there are also a lot of fiction. We just came back from the big environmental conference out in Reno, where Kim Stanley Robinson spoke. And has anyone read his book? Well, he was positive. He was funny. He was enthusiastic. And he's a real scientist. He was just amazing. So if a guy like that can have hope after, and in that book, what is it called? Is it Ministry of the Future or the other one? We always get them mixed. Yeah. Is it Ministry of the Future? Yeah, there's two of them that have the same name. But anyway, there are solutions. I can't speak to them today, but I should list them next time I do a lecture. Thank you. That's a good idea. Yes.
I was wondering, for when you can't actually go and you have to do remote research primarily, how do you vet your sources, or how do you make sure the information you're using is good and accurate?
Are you asking me if I use ChatGPT?
No. I recently learned that Google Maps will show you different names for places depending on what country you live in. So I'm oh, every bit of information I'm getting is tailored to me.
Well, it's good that you have that filter, because certainly more today than ever, there's a lot of misinformation. But I've been interacting with scientists a lot, and all the research. I've been also, and mention this, used to go to the AGU, American Geophysical Union conferences, where I'd be on a panel or talk. But the real reason I love going there is I would go to all the all the panels and learn a lot. I think I'm sharp enough to know the difference between bullshit and, and I get more than one source about what I'm doing. But you're right about the maps. First of all, Trump is so stupid. Greenland is not that big. It's the map, the way it's situated that makes it look so big. So, yeah.
If I could add one thing, over the years, I've discovered that old maps are really worth it. If you can find a map in a book, or a map on eBay, or a map at a yard sale or something like that, from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, there's going to be information on that map that isn't on a new map. And it's only on those new maps that they're taking away information, not wanting you to know things.
Yeah, like Chile. When we were in Chile for a month and we went to the Atacama Desert, you had an old map.
Yeah, and I think right now, if you look at a map of Paris, you won't find the American embassy on there. But if it's right, it's on Boissy d'Anglas, and it's right next to the
Concorde. Yeah, Place de la Concorde.
Anyways, but on older maps, it's right there in case you need to go there. But on newer maps, it's not on the map.
Yeah.
So keep those old maps, find them, and buy them.
My Paris walking map. Okay.
Maybe last question. I'm wondering what place or what adventure you'd like to have next.
My studio. We've been traveling so much of late, and I have so much information in my head, and I'm not getting any younger. And I really want to do a lot more processing and reviewing. And this topic of hubris covers so much. It's the flooding. It's infrastructure, but it's more than that. It's about man, mostly man, controlling nature, and that's not working. So we really need some new paradigms. We need some new kinds of ways of thinking, and there are people thinking about new ways of thinking. Yeah.
How many dams in the United States are considered at risk?
Oh, darn it. You gave me a trick question. I don't know, but lots. Do you know? How much?
100.
Yeah. And we're looking at all of them. Not that I want to just, work with dams all the time, but it's a wonderful symbol. If you try to do something, you think you're doing the right thing. And this is human nature, but you don't think ahead. And that's one of the problems of our culture. Not the Chinese culture, by the way, is that we only think in very short terms. We don't think of the consequences because a lot of the thinking that goes on is motivated by greed. It's not motivated, about all the fossil fuel we're taking out, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we could have much more clean energy, couldn't we? We don't have to worry about the Strait of Hormuz. So, but look up. I don't want to end on a negative note.
Well, maybe I have one more question, maybe on
Sure.
on a more positive note. You did speak a little bit about some research that you had heard about related to beauty and how that brings people into your subject matter. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like that's
Well, I
helpful.
believe in that because, I am ultimately first a painter. I'm an artist, and I haven't wanted, and that's why when I was in the feminist movement, I wasn't an essentialist, as painting vaginas. I just couldn't be that direct, like a Judy Chicago. But beauty, I think, is a way in. And with AI and whatever we have in technology, which a lot of it is great, I love a lot of it. It can, it's a good thing, but it doesn't take the place of the human reaction, the human quality. That's why you're running a museum, and you're doing it so that you have all this different kind of art here that people can respond to. It's like the difference between, having a cyborg to talk to on your computer and having a real lover, right? So those things matter. And that's why I was so thrilled when they approached me during COVID to use that image. And then it, went wild because people, they measured it. They were social scientists and measured the fact. So that's a good note to end. Thank you.